What's up, guys? Welcome to Jimmy Hadler's YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jimmy Hadler, and today's episode will be the GOAT series to continue. And today's episode is about kickers. So, as I mentioned before, we'll be going through the kicker list. And the way I do my criteria, as like I did with the punters, is I pick 5 guys that should be in the conversation. I have 1 honorable mention, and then I choose my GOAT at the end of the series. No rankings at all, just my honorable mention, my ultimate GOAT, and 5 people. So that's what I got there for the criteria of the GOAT series for kickers. Before I get to it, make sure you leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're so close to getting 230 subs and hoping to get that by the end of this month. So if you haven't already subbed and already haven't left a like as I'm doing this video, please go do so. Appreciate it. All right. So what is a kicker? So a kicker is simply kicking the football. That's the easiest way to describe it. But there are different roles that the kicker has to do. So one role is they have to kick for an extra point after their team scores a touchdown, whether it's an offensive or defensive touchdown. Usually it's an offensive touchdown. They also do kickoffs, which is after your team scores, or the start of the second half or the start of the game. That's when they have to kick the ball off. They also can do onside kicks, which is part of the kickoff timing. So they could do it to try to get the ball back for their team. And then there's a field goal they can also do, which is worth 3 points if the team doesn't convert on touchdown. That's where the kickers usually come in handy, and they try to get the 3 points and do very well for the team. They try to win out there that way. There are different kicking styles for a kicker. One is the soccer style kicking, which is taking a couple steps back and stepping 2 steps to your right or 2 steps to your left. Put your arm up like a soccer player would do in corner, and they kick it to try to get a goal in like soccer. But in this case, it's try to get it through the net and through the goalpost there. But it's simply just taking the step back or the right or left, depending on how you are of a kicker, if you're right footy or left foot. But back in the day, a lot of kickers would kick the football straight. So they kick the football straight, like basically the tip tap, like top of the toe. Some people do that. I know in soccer, some soccer players do that, but it's like people don't like that. It's really like the bad kicking style. But back in the day when kickers did that, they had to use special shoes that would help flatten the football. So when they did that, the football would get flattened and would help them out there when it was kicked. And another key note for kickers, you never want the laces inside. Never inside when the kicker's about to kick it. You never want to hit the laces. Never want that because it hurts them and the ball goes terribly wrong for them. Like you're trying to it's a 30-yard field goal. It could go wide left, wide right. It could go bad. It could just instantly go bad for you. And you can go ask Ray Finkle about that. Go check out Jim Carrey's movie, Ace Ventura.
For Miami. There's the snap. Marino holds the kick. And it's wide. Oh, no, it's no good. Ray Finkle blew a 26-yard field goal. I don't believe it. The Dolphins lose. The Dolphins lose. The Dolphins lose the Super Bowl. Oh, no.
So let's get to our first guy on the list here, and that is Adam Vinatieri. Adam Vinatieri played 24 seasons with the Patriots and the Colts, 4-time Super Bowl champion, 3 first-team All-Pro, 4 Super Bowls. 4 Super Bowls, that's also crazy. 1-time NFL leading scorer, that's pretty good. 2000s All-Decade team, so he's the best player for kicker in his decade. He made the 100th anniversary team. That's very good for him. He also made the All-Rookie team. His stats, folks. His field goals were 599 out of 715. So that's pretty good. The field goal percentage was 83.8%. His longest field goal ever was 57 yards. Very impressive again. His most career points scored, which is the all-time leading scorer in the NFL, is 2,673. Very good for him. And then this is another interesting fact I like to get out. The most consecutive field goals he made, 44. He made 44 field goals, not extra points, 3-point worthy points, and he made them 44 times. That's insane to me. That's very impressive of him not messing up and going on that streak. So that's very good for him. He had the most combined regular season and postseason games played, which was 397 games. So he played 397 games of a combined regular season and postseason. He also has the most career field goals made, which is 599. Again, impressive. Also has the most field goals attempted, which is 715, as I mentioned before. And he has the most seasons with 100 or more points in a season. So that's very impressive. And it was 21. So 21 seasons, Adam Vinatieri had at least 100 or more points. Again, very impressive. He has the most career overtime field goals, 11. Most field goals made in a postseason, which is currently tied because of last year, Evan McPherson for the Bengals kicker. He tied it up. But before Evan McPherson, folks, he had the most field goals made in the postseason, which was 14. And that was in 2006 that occurred. And then to bring up the interesting, what Adam Vinatieri is well known for is his ice in his veins. Ice. Well, ice in his veins. He had the ice in his veins. The biggest one of his, what he's really known for is being the clutch when the game's on the line. The first one I can bring up to you guys is the Tuck Rule, the famous game where the Raiders and the Patriots took on each other in the playoffs. Very snowy game. Should have been a sack if you guys recall that Charles Woodson initially sacked Tom Brady, but then after ruling, the refs went over and they changed the whole ruling and he tucked it. So it wasn't a fumble. It was considered that as a sack still, but he held on to it. So wasn't a fumble. And that basically changed the whole game, changed the whole momentum, and gave the Patriots life right then and there and saved them their season. Towards the end of the game, Adam Vinatieri is given an opportunity to send the Patriots into overtime against the Raiders. It was a 45-yard field goal opportunity in the swirling winter. The snow's going right up his face. Snow is on the ground. They're getting the offensive line to help clean the snow out so he gets the right position for it and doesn't slip, or nor the football gets affected from the snow. So that occurs, and the seconds go, clock's ticking, and then all of a sudden he banks it in. He makes it in. Amazing there. So he sends the game to overtime, and then during overtime, he won the game with another clutch field goal, ice in his veins, which is a 23-yard field goal, and send the Patriots to a playoff victory, which is amazing. Very cool. Very good for Adam Vinatieri and the Patriots for that. But that's not all, folks. That's not all of how clutch he was. In the first Super Bowl victory for the Patriots that season, Adam Vinatieri, on the final play of the game, has a 48-yard field goal opportunity to give the Patriots the first Super Bowl victory ever. 48 yards. That's very hard, folks. Nowadays, more kickers can make that. But back then, especially when you look at the statistics, it was hard at that time. And it was the final seconds left in the final play, and he nails it right in there against the Rams. He nailed it against the St. Louis Rams at the time to win 20-17 Patriots first Super Bowl victory once again. And it was an upset victory over the St. Louis Rams, the Show Turf team at the time. And the other interesting fact about that game, the Rams were 14-point favorites coming into that game. 14-point favorites. You should be able to win that game. If you're going to be 14-point favorites, you're expected to win that game. But the Patriots upset the Rams. So congrats to the Patriots getting that first Super Bowl victory. And then that's not all, folks. Then we go to another Super Bowl of the Patriots. Adam Vinatieri is given the opportunity once again with 4 seconds left in the game against the Carolina Panthers. And it's a 41-yard field goal opportunity. He nails it right in there again, and he wins the Patriots another Super Bowl. So that's 2 Super Bowls in a row, deciding factor. Very impressive to see. He wins it with 2 Super Bowls and to be the deciding factor in those games. That's pretty awesome for Adam Vinatieri. Right now, he's not in the Hall of Fame, but he will be in soon. And again, watching Adam Vinatieri, just to look at him, the work ethic, the practice he took, and how consistent he was for 24 years in the NFL, impressive to me. And especially when he kicked the football, you would watch how he practiced it, and he just keep going, and he wouldn't stop, and he just kept making them all. And he was very good when the game's on his line. He's got ice in his veins. He's clutch. That's why I call him Mr. Clutch Adam Vinatieri. Mr. Ice in his veins, if you want to say. This man has the best field goal percentage in NFL history as of this current moment if he were to retire. He is very accurate. I call him Mr. Accurate because he makes his field goals all the time. And going off the field goal percentage, he's the most accurate kicker in NFL history as of this moment. And that is Justin Tucker. Justin Tucker has played 10 seasons in the NFL, and he's still playing with the Baltimore Ravens still. He's a Super Bowl champion, 5 first-team All-Pro, 3 second-team All-Pro, 6-time Pro Bowler. He made the 2010 All-Decades team for the NFL. His stats, folks. He's made 363 field goals. He's attempted 401, and that leaves a percentage of a 90.5%. Very impressive to me, as I mentioned before. Very impressive. His points scored in his career, 1,502. He also has the longest field goal of all time. Even if it was a lucky, like, doinked in, you still have to give him credit, folks. You still have to give him credit, especially dome, too, when it's easier to make a field goal in the dome than outside, I would argue. And that was a 66-yard field goal. So he holds the record as this moment he did against the Detroit Lions. And then his touchbacks and kickoffs are 608 touchbacks. Again, impressive. So once again, as I mentioned with the NFL records, he currently has 90.5 career field goal percentage. Again, impressive. Longest field goal, 66 yards. He has the most 50 or more yard field goals in a game, which is tied currently, and that's 3. He's also kicked a 47-yard field goal in double overtime to win the game, and that's in the playoffs to send the Ravens to the Super Bowl. Very impressive. And he's not in the Hall of Fame yet at this current moment, but he will be, and he's the most accurate kicker, I would argue, for NFL kickers of all time. As of this moment, I would argue that. But with Justin Tucker, when I've seen him play, as I've got to work, as you guys seen on other videos I've done on YouTube and on this channel, when I was working for the Baltimore Ravens game day, I got to see Justin Tucker out there before the game. And I remember watching how he would just practice, and he would just like put his arm up, he'd test the wind out, he would check his feet, make sure his cleats are right, and I just keep seeing him practice, and he would keep going farther back up until it was like a 60-yarder. He would keep doing it, and he would just be making sure he had it. So I really appreciate his work ethic and the appreciation he has to the game. So it's very good for him. So Justin Tucker, he's one of the most accurate kickers. I would say the most accurate kicker of all time. But again, he will be in the Hall of Fame soon. And he doesn't have, like, as I go through the list, as like Adam Vinatieri's played over 20 seasons. The rest of these guys have been close to 20 seasons. Justin Tucker's at 10 of this current moment. So we're going to see at least 20 because he's got a lot of more years left in him. But the one thing I always get annoyed with the Baltimore Ravens, especially when I watch them sometimes, is Harbaugh, the Ravens head coach. He doesn't use Justin Tucker sometimes when the game's online. He'll go for 2 points because he's very aggressive, like a 2-point conversion, and decide not to kick the extra point, or he'll decide to go for it instead of taking the field goal of 3 points. That is the annoyance because you basically have one of the greatest kickers right next to you and you don't use him. So that's a big flaw, I would say, for the Ravens, is what I'm going to say. They should use Justin Tucker a lot more. Next player on the list is Morten Andersen. Mr. Automatic is what his nickname is given. Played 25 seasons with the Saints, Falcons, Vikings, Giants, and Chiefs. He's a 5 first-team All-Pro, 1 second-team All-Pro, 7-time Pro Bowler, 2-time Golden Toe Award, as I mentioned with the last episode, where some of the punters on the list got it. Basically, it's telling us that the best kicker, the best person who kicked the football punt, whatever, had the best. And he got it twice, so that's very impressive to me. He made the 80s, 90s All-Decade team. Very impressive. He's in the Saints Hall of Fame. In 2009, he got it. He was inducted into the Saints Ring of Honor, which was 2015. His stats, folks. He's played 382 games. Impressive me. Had a lot of years. Again, 25 seasons. Played a lot of games. His field goal percentage, folks. He made 565 out of 709. That's a 80%, technically a 79.7, but I would round it to an 80% of the time he makes his field goals. That's a big difference because he's the second closest to Justin Tucker. So it's very good for him. And then to extra points. This is where I really call him Mr. Automatic. He made 849 out of 859. That is a 98.8%. Very impressive again. Very impressive. And then his points scored, he's the top 10 for points scored of all time, points leader. He's in the top 10 for the NFL all-time list, which is 2,544. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2017. And then, folks, what he's most famously known for, and I love him for this because I'm a Packers fan, he helped the Falcons defeat the Minnesota Vikings in a 1998 NFC Championship game that sent the Falcons to the first Super Bowl ever. Even though the Falcons didn't win against John Elway, Shannon Sharpe, Terrell Davis, the Denver Broncos at the time still helped me of defeating the Minnesota Vikings. That's very impressive to me. But to give you the story behind that is both teams, the Minnesota Vikings and the Atlanta Falcons, both had Anderson on their team. There was a Morton Anderson, as I just mentioned, on as the guy here. He played for the Falcons in this game. And then you had Gary Anderson, who was the Vikings kicker. So the game kept going back and forth, kept going back and forth. Gary Anderson, the Vikings kicker, he's given an opportunity to win the game for the Vikings. He kicks it, and he shanks it and misses it, giving the Falcons an opportunity to win the game. So the Falcons are given an opportunity to win the game, and Morton Anderson nails it, wins the game for us, and he defeats the Vikings. Thank you for defeating the Vikings. And the Falcons go to the Super Bowl. They didn't win, as I mentioned before, but hey, if you can beat the Vikings for me, I'll love that guy. And I do like Morton Anderson. And then to bring up more interesting achievements for him, he played 382 games. He has the most consecutive games scoring, which is 360. So imagine 360 games he's playing, and he at least scored. 360 games, and you score at least a point. That's very impressive to me. And he's also tied, as I mentioned before, he's tied for 50 or more yard field goals in a game, which is 3. So again, impressive to me. But I didn't get to grow up watching him a lot, but thanks to him defeating the Vikings, I appreciate it once again. Just looking at some of his highlights, I really liked how, again, Mr. Automatic, he would just nail it in. He's basically the Adam Vinatieri before Adam Vinatieri at the time. He would make them in. He would just nail them, just get in, especially in 25 years. That's very impressive for a guy. And I would also say he's basically the Frank Gore, as I mentioned with Zach the last episode of the GOAT series of punters. He played 25 years. Frank Gore is what the term is for a guy who plays very long when he shouldn't have to, and he's basically in the league forever. That's the Frank Gore of this list. 25 years. Very impressive to me. And also see when he kicked the field goal of like where he did the practice I mentioned with Justin Tucker and Vinatieri, the work and the time they took the practice. Very impressive to see Morton Anderson just make it in. And how he kept practicing. So yeah, and he also had ice in his veins, and he's also another clutch player too. George Blanda played 26 seasons of football with the Chicago Bears, Baltimore Colts at the time. So there's the Indianapolis Colts and the Baltimore Ravens now, but at the time before the merger, it was the Baltimore Colts. And then he played for the Houston Oilers, which the Houston Oilers no longer exist. They are now the Tennessee Titans. And he also played for the Raiders. He won the NFL Man of the Year award. And as I mentioned before, some of his achievements were before the merger. He's a 3-time AFL champion, 1-time MVP in the AFL, and he's in the Titans Ring of Honor. So again, impressive for a kicker to win the MVP award. His stats, folks. For field goals, he's 335 out of 641. That's a 52.3%. So it's not terrible. That's all right. During his time, especially, like, a lot of kickers couldn't make the field goal. So you have to give him appreciation during his time because of a different era from the other guys, because it's a different ball game of football. So you have to give appreciation where it's due for him. And then for extra points, which he was very good, like as I mentioned before, Mr. Automatic Anderson. His extra points, 943 out of 959, 98.3%. Very impressive. And he has the most all-time for extra points made. Very impressive. And attempted. He was inducted in the Hall of Fame in 1981. So I didn't get to watch him at all, really, because I wasn't born during his time at all. I was just looking at like some highlights or what I could really find when I was doing my research about him. Very good on his extra, where he would especially practice on the extra points. His field goals, he kept getting better throughout his career, but he just kept finding different styles. I mentioned with like the different shoes, the toe tap, but he was like, he was basically in the era where he basically kicked with his toe. But as his career went on, he started to like do what normal kickers like Adam Vinatieri, Morton Anderson, Justin Tucker, is they do the slice of basically on your, like that part of your foot of your side. So he basically got better with the extra points later in his career. That's what I would say about him. All right. And then another guy who's like Frank Gore is Lou Groza. Lou Groza played 21 seasons with the Cleveland Browns, one-time NFL MVP. Again, very impressive. Very impressive for kickers because they didn't get that appreciation a lot. A four-time NFL champion. He's a four-time first-team All-Pro, two-time second-team All-Pro, nine-time Pro Bowler. Again, impressive. He was a one-time NFL scoring leader. He made the 1950s All-Decade team, made the NFL 50th anniversary team in the Cleveland Browns Ring of Honor. Very impressive. And he has his jersey retired, number 76 with the Cleveland Browns. So, again, impressive to me. His stats, folks, 234 out of 405. That is a 57.8%. So it's better than Blanda, but he got less attempts in his area. He got less attempts for field goals because because most teams in the NFL during his time wanted to go for it and try to they just didn't believe in field goals. They just didn't believe in for some reason. I don't know why. His longest field goal ever made, 52 yards. Impressive. Extra points, 641 out of 657, 97.6%. And he was inducted to the Hall of Fame in 1974. Again, impressive. I never got to watch Lou Groza play. As I mentioned before with Blanda, I was born when he played or got to see anything about him. No, again, when you there was very hard to find Lou Groza tape during my research of what I could find of him, but the way I kept looking in the stories and the articles about him, he kept getting better and better, as I mentioned with Blanda, but he won the MVP award in the NFL. So that's very impressive to me. Field goals. As I mentioned before, as I mentioned with Blanda, the toe taps is where basically those two were in the era, and then all of a sudden later in the career, they go with the size I mentioned before. His work ethic, from what I heard from coaches, reading through the articles and research, very good, taking his time, practicing a whole lot. He never stopped, especially the extra points, which is what I really like about him, is he would not only practice his extra points, but he would especially practice the field goals. So that's very impressive. And he's played a longevity of his career, 21 years. Especially for these kickers. Most kickers don't last 20 years in the NFL. Most. The greats, they will get to 20 years. But the average for a kicker is 5 years. You rarely see that in today's NFL. Only Justin Tucker will probably have the chance to get up to 20 seasons, but you rarely see that out of the other guys. I mean, Mason Crosby for the Green Bay Packers, he's played a whole lot of seasons, so rarely any guys you see that gets up to 20 years of football. Rarely see that anymore. All right, and then our last guy here, Sebastian Janikowski, played 18 seasons with the Raiders majority of his time, and he also played with the Seahawks. He has one second-team All-Pro, one Pro Bowl. His stats, folks, for field goals, he's 436 out of 542. For field goal percentage, that is 80.4. Very impressive. Again, new era. Did very good in his era. Longest field goal, folks, 63 yards. Very impressive. And then for kickoffs, when he would have to do touchbacks, which was 446 times. Again, impressive me. He's also the Raiders' all-time leading scorer with 1,799 points. And he holds the NFL record for longest field goal in overtime, 57 yards. So he's got ice in his veins when the game is online, especially in overtime, 57 yards. That's very rare for anyone to make a 57-yard field goal in overtime when the game is on the line, especially. So good job for him. He's also tied for most field goals in one quarter, 4. He also has the most field goals of 50 or more yards in his career, 58 times. 58 times, folks. Again, impressing me. He's also had the most field goals attempted, 60 or more yards in a career, which is 8. So he attempted 8 times to go 60 or more yards for a field goal. Also has the most field goals of 50 or more yards made in a game, which is impressive, and he's tied currently with Justin Tucker. He's also had the longest field goal attempt, which is 76 yards. That didn't happen, folks. It did not. It wasn't even close when he got it. It was like basically a punt return back. So that's what I got about Sebastian Janikowski, and he's not in the Hall of Fame yet. But when I got to grow up watching him, I got to see him when I was growing up. This guy really liked to go very far. Very far. It's like you're on a golfing range and he tries to be a Happy Gilmore. That's what he was trying to be. He tries to be a Happy Gilmore, kicking that long distance, folks. And it was fun watching that. Very fun. I'm not a Raiders fan, but it was very fun watching him try to attempt the longest field goal ever. I mean, he had so many chances, especially with that 76 yards I mentioned before. Now it's very cool to see how he could go very far back and it worked out sometimes. Sometimes it didn't, as I mentioned with a 76-yard, but it worked out most of the time. He made 8 times in his career. He made 60 or more yards. So it's very impressive, mate. Very impressive. But folks, that's the end of the list. But just to recap the guys I have on the list: Sebastian Janikowski, Luke Groza, George Blanda, Morten Anderson, Justin Tucker, and Vinatieri. So as I mentioned before, how I'm doing this whole list. 6 guys. I apologize. I think I said 5 at the beginning of this video. I mean 6. So I have my honorable mention. I have my ultimate goats. Start off with my honorable mention. I have Sebastian Janikowski just because he deserves it with playing 18 seasons in the NFL, all-time leading scorer for the Raiders, and he attempted and made a lot of field goals in his career, very far ones. So I give him the credit there because I really liked him, especially as a player. So for me, he deserves to be honorable mention on this list. All right, then my ultimate goat here, folks. For me, it's not Lou Groza, George Blanda because they play in a different era and they weren't consistent all the time, especially with like the 52 for George Blanda on field goals and 57.8 for Luke Groza. Those guys have to be out there. Morten Anderson, you could make the case for him as the ultimate go because he's Mr. Automatic, but again, he doesn't hold the ultimate field goal percentage of that, but extra points he's very good at. So yeah, I can't give it to Morten Anderson, even though he has ice in his veins. I definitely think he's in my top 3, I would say, but the other 2 guys, Justin Tucker and Adam Vinatieri, are definitely over him, way better players, just how it was. So to go off with my ultimate goat here, really comes down to Adam Vinatieri and Justin Tucker. Justin Tucker, he has a 90.5% of making field goals. For me, since he's played 10 seasons, and that's impressive to me, of him making those many field goals and being very good at it, I have to see a couple more years out of him. I have to see him get up to the 20 seasons. And I just have to see more because that number is not going to stay forever. It might go down, might go up. So by the time he retires, he will be still the most accurate kicker. That's why I give him props. But with Adam Vinatieri, Mr. Clutch, I would say, he won 2 Super Bowls when the game was on the line. 1-2. That's very impressive to me. Even though he's a 4-time champion. Very good on field goal percentage, unlike Justin Tucker with that 90.5, 83.8 for Adam Vinatieri impressed me, and his extra points again impressed me. So I have to put Adam Vinatieri here as of this current moment as my ultimate goat here for kickers. But when Justin Tucker retires, which is going to be a couple years from now, it's going to be at least 5-6 years because he's got a lot left in him. When he gets up to 18, 20 seasons in his career, then I can put him in there because I need to see a longer sample data from him. That's where I get it because when I'm looking at 10 seasons, I'm like, okay, that's cool and great and everything with his field goals, but it gives me like I need to have a better confidence level, especially when you're looking at the statistics wise. If you're taking statistics, you have to look at a broader version because you're basically given for him, you're looking at a 99.7 confidence level interval for him, where he's done pretty well because of the 10 seasons. But when you span it out, like when you give a better sample data for Adam Vinatieri since he played 24 seasons, you can go look at it. Okay, I can have a 90% confidence level. So that's different from my confidence level that he can make these field goals and have a better statistics wise. So because of Justin Tucker, smaller sample data, smaller sample data, that's why I give it to Adam Vinatieri. I need to see more years out of Justin Tucker. I know Raven fans right away are just like, how can you do this? He's the GOAT. He's the most accurate kicker. I just need to see him play a couple more seasons, and then he's my GOAT. So, folks, just a reminder, I will give it to Adam Vinatieri as my ultimate GOAT. But that will do my list here of my kickers. As I mentioned before, make sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and comment below who is your kicker. Who is your GOAT kicker? Who's your GOAT kicker? And who should have been in the list that I didn't mention, and who's your honorable mention? That's what I'd like to ask you folks. That's what I'd like to ask you. So I just think Adam Vinatieri, because of how long he played and how consistent he was, and especially in the postseason, that's very impressed me. And Mr. Clutch, he got it done. But Justin Tucker, he will be the GOAT. He will be the GOAT by the time he retires. So that's a wrap in the studio, folks. Our next episode will be still continuing with special teams. But again, thank you as always for watching my video. and stay tuned for the next one. And enjoy my.